The text came in at 9:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I stared at it so long the screen dimmed, then lit back up, then dimmed again. We're cutting you loose. Company card cancelled. Figure out your way home. That was it. 15 years of loyalty, reduced to one sentence. I was standing in the lobby of a business hotel in Munich. Marble floors. Soft jazz playing somewhere near the bar. People rolling their suitcases across the polished tile like nothing in the world was wrong. But my world had just cracked open. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone. I just stood there staring at that message while my reflection in the glass doors looked like someone else entirely. I typed back the only thing I could manage. Understood. And then I sat down. Because if I didn't sit, I might fall. Let me explain how a 49-year-old single mother ends up stranded in another country with $83 in her wallet and a boss who thinks she's disposable. My name is Elena Carter. Former Army logistics officer. 2 overseas deployments before I ever wore a blazer instead of a uniform. I have a 17-year-old daughter, Lily. She's brilliant. Stubborn. Already talking about engineering schools like MIT is just down the street. Her father passed away 9 years ago. Since then it's been us. Everything I've done, every late meeting, every red-eye flight, every swallowed insult, has been for her future. And that's how I ended up working for Harrison Global Infrastructure. 15 years. I built their international supplier network from scratch. Steel manufacturers in Germany. Component engineers in Italy. Specialized fabrication teams in Japan. I didn't just send emails. I flew out. I visited factories. I learned enough German to discuss tensile strength over coffee. I remembered birthdays. I asked about their kids. Because that's how trust works. And trust is what keeps billion-dollar projects standing. My boss though? Daniel Mercer. 42. Polished. Can be the kind of man who says optics more than integrity. He'd been promoted over me 3 years ago. You're excellent operationally, Elena, he used to say. But leadership requires a different kind of energy. Translation: he liked boardrooms. I liked results. But I kept quiet. Because Lily's tuition wasn't going to pay itself. 3 months ago Daniel called me into his office. We have a situation, he said, tapping his tablet like it offended him. Our German steel supplier is threatening to walk. I didn't even need to ask which one. Keller Stahlwerk. Family of 3 generations. Precision steel for major infrastructure projects. I'd spent 10 years nurturing that relationship. Why? I asked calmly. He shrugged. They claim our demands are unrealistic. Claimed, like they were exaggerating. But I already knew what had happened. Daniel had pushed for a 12% price cut. Faster delivery. No adjustment in contract guarantees. No conversation. Just pressure. I'll handle it, I said. As I always did. 6 weeks later I was in Germany. 6 weeks away from Lily during her final year of high school. Her robotics competition. Her campus tours. Her life. I'll be back before winter formal, I promised her on FaceTime. She smiled. Go save the company again, Mom. I laughed. I wish I hadn't. The Keller facility sat outside Munich, 40 minutes by train. Clean, organized, efficient. The scent of hot steel and oil in the air. Matthias Keller met me personally. 62. Solid handshake. Eyes that measured people carefully. His daughter Clara handled operations. Observant. Quiet in a way that meant she noticed everything. We talked for hours that first day. Specifications. Production capacity. Deadlines. And eventually, respect. Your director speaks as though we are replaceable, Matthias said carefully. I didn't defend Daniel. Because I couldn't. I'm here to fix that, I told him. And I meant it. Over 5 weeks I rebuilt what Daniel had nearly destroyed. We restructured delivery timelines. Adjusted payment terms. Secured guaranteed order volumes that allowed their factory to scale responsibly. It wasn't magic. It was listening. It was partnership. And by the end of week 5, we had an $11 million agreement ready to sign. But there was one condition. You, Matthias said, sliding the draft contract toward me, will remain our sole liaison. If you are removed, the contract dissolves. I blinked. That's unusual. So is trust, Clara replied softly. I didn't realize at the time how important that clause would become. But that wasn't even the worst part. The night before signing, I checked the final documents in my hotel room. Everything was ready. $11 million secured. A major bridge project saved. 6 weeks of sacrifice about to pay off. Then my phone buzzed. Daniel. I almost ignored it. I wish I had. We're cutting you loose. Company card canceled. Figure out your way home. No warning. No phone call. No explanation. Just erased. I checked the company travel app. My return flight? Canceled. I opened my banking app. Personal savings were tied up in Lily's college account. I had $83 in my purse. $83. After 15 years. After missing my daughter's robotics finals. After defending a company that wouldn't even defend me. I sat in that lobby for nearly an hour. People laughed at the bar. A couple argued quietly near the elevator. Somewhere glasses clinked. And I realized something. It wasn't shock I felt. It was clarity. Crystal clear. My briefcase sat beside me. Inside it, an unsigned $11 million contract. And a clause that said Harrison Global could not access Keller Steel without me. That's when I understood. Daniel hadn't just fired me. He had detonated his own company. And he had no idea. I stood up, picked up my briefcase, and walked back to the train station. Because what I was about to do wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was something much more dangerous. It was leverage. And they had just handed it to me. The train ride back to Keller Stallwork felt longer than usual. Outside the window, the German countryside blurred past in soft darkness. Quiet villages. Streetlights glowing in neat lines. Everything calm. Unlike my pulse. I kept replaying Daniel's text in my head. Figure out your way home. As if I were some intern who misplaced a receipt. As if I hadn't spent 15 years building the very network he bragged about in shareholder meetings. But the more I thought about it, the calmer I became. As something had shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about protecting the company. I was thinking about protecting myself. And Lily. And that changed everything. When I walked into the Keller facility, the overhead lights were still on. Matthias and Clara were in the upstairs office. Paperwork spread across the large wooden table. Preparing for the morning signing. They both looked up when I stepped inside. Elena. Clara frowned. Is everything all right? I closed the door behind me. No, I said evenly. It isn't. Matthias stood slowly. What happened? I placed my phone on the table and slid it toward him. He read the message once. Then again. His jaw tightened. They fired you? He asked quietly. Yes. Tonight. Yes. And you are still here? Clara asked. I don't have a flight home. They canceled it. Silence filled the room. Not awkward silence. Heavy silence. The kind that settles when something deeply unfair has just occurred. Matthias leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. After 6 weeks, he muttered. After everything. I nodded. They told me to figure out how to get home. Clara's eyes flashed. That is unacceptable. I expected sympathy. What I didn't expect was what came next. Matthias tapped the contract on the table. And tomorrow? He asked carefully. What do you want to happen? It took me a second to understand his question. What do you mean? He slid the document toward me. This agreement is written with you as primary liaison. Any structural changes require your approval. That was intentional. I stared at the page. The clause. I'd negotiated it thinking it protected efficiency. Now I realized. Protected me. But I don't work for Harrison anymore, I said quietly. Exactly, Matthias replied. And that's when it hit me fully. Without me, there was no deal. Daniel had fired the only person Keller trusted. He hadn't just removed an employee. He'd removed the foundation. They'll send someone else, I said automatically. Matthias shook his head. We will not speak to someone else. Clara folded her arms. We built this with you. Not with him. I felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Not anger. Not fear. Validation. After years of being told I was operational support. Someone was saying I was essential. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. There is another company, Matthias said slowly. My head lifted. Which one? Nova Industrial. I'd heard of them. Competitor. Aggressive expansion. Deep pockets. They have approached us for nearly a year, Clara added. Better financial terms. Respectful negotiations. But you stayed with Harrison, I said. Yes, Matthias replied. Because of you. That landed harder than Daniel's text ever could. Why are you telling me this? I asked quietly. Matthias looked directly at me. Because Nova asked if we knew anyone capable of leading international procurement for their European expansion. My stomach dropped. They meant you. I almost laughed. I was fired 3 hours ago. By a man who clearly does not understand value, Clara said sharply. I shook my head. I have a daughter at home. College applications. Stability matters. Matthias leaned forward. Stability built on disrespect is not stability. It is dependency. The words settled deep. Because he was right. For years I'd tolerated Daniel's condescension. His subtle dismissals. His public credit-taking. Because I thought I had no other option. Because I was afraid to risk Lily's future. But what kind of example was that? Stay small. Stay quiet. Stay grateful. Even when you're treated like you're replaceable. I thought about Lily standing on robotic stages, refusing to accept second place. And here I was accepting less than I deserved. I looked down at the unsigned contract. $11 million. 6 weeks of work. Trust built conversation by conversation. Daniel thought he could erase me with one text. But he couldn't erase this. What happens if Nova calls tomorrow? I asked. Matthias's expression turned almost amused. Then we answer. And Harrison? Clara's voice was calm. They will learn. I let out a slow breath. This was the turning point. I could walk away quietly. Find another mid-level role. Start over. Or I could stop apologizing for being good at what I do. What would Nova need? I asked. Matthias smiled for the first time that night. Someone who understands global suppliers. Someone who negotiates with respect. Someone who can build what you built here. He paused. And someone who knows her own worth. The room felt warmer somehow. For the first time since that text message, I wasn't thinking about being stranded. I was thinking about possibilities. But then doubt crept in. What if this backfires? I whispered. What if Daniel sues me? For what? Clara asked. For being fired? I almost smiled. Matthias stood and walked toward the window overlooking the factory floor. When someone shows you who they are, he said quietly, believe them. He turned back to me. Your director showed you exactly who he is. I thought about the years. The late nights. The flights. The credit he took in meetings while I sat silently. I had believed I was protecting my daughter by staying. But maybe I had been teaching her the wrong lesson. Maybe protecting her meant showing her how to walk away when you're disrespected. So, Matthias said gently, what do you want to do, Elena? No one had asked me that in a long time. What did I want? Not what was safe. Not what was expected. What did I actually want? I lifted my chin. I want to stop being disposable. Clara nodded once. Then tomorrow, she said, we make some phone calls. And for the first time that night, I smiled. Because Daniel thought he'd left me stranded. He thought I'd spend the night panicking. Instead, I was about to sleep in the guest room upstairs. While his entire division rested on a contract he no longer had access to. He had no idea what morning was bringing. And I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I barely slept that night. Not because I was scared. Because I was thinking. About Lily. About the example I was setting. About the difference between loyalty and self-abandonment. At 6:30 a.m. I was already downstairs in the Keller kitchen. Claire was pouring coffee. Matthias was reading through financial projections like nothing seismic was about to happen. You look calm, I said. Matthias smiled slightly. I have been in business 40 years. Calm is an advantage. I wished I felt as steady. At 8 a.m., instead of preparing the signing table for Harrison Global, Matthias dialed Nova Industrial. He put the call on speaker. My hands were folded tightly in my lap, but my voice, if needed, would not shake. I promised myself that. Good morning, Matthias began. This is Matthias Keller from Keller Stallwork. Pause. Yes, he continued. We spoke about potential collaboration. Another pause. I have someone here you should meet. She is the reason Harrison Global wanted to work with us. And she is now available. My pulse quickened. Available. Such a small word. Such a powerful one. Matthias listened, nodded, then glanced at me. They would like to meet today, he said, covering the receiver. Today. This wasn't hypothetical anymore. This was real. Do it, I said. He returned to the call. Excellent. We will be there this afternoon. Then he hung up. Just like that. A door closed. Another opened. But that wasn't even the boldest move of the morning. At 8:17 a.m. Daniel called Matthias. Right on schedule. Expecting to confirm the 10 a.m. signing. Matthias answered. Speaker on. Elena. Daniel's voice cut through immediately. I've been trying to reach you. I didn't respond. Matthias did. She is here. Silence. Good, Daniel said briskly. Let's finalize this agreement. No, Matthias replied calmly. We will not be signing. Dead air. I'm sorry. Daniel's tone sharpened. We will not be working with Harrison Global. You can't be serious, Daniel snapped. We have a verbal agreement. You had an agreement with Elena, Matthias corrected. You terminated her. That's an internal matter. It is a respect matter, Matthias said evenly. And respect is not internal. Daniel's breathing grew heavier through the speaker. Is this about money? Because we can revisit the pricing structure. It is not about money. Another pause. Then Daniel made the mistake I had been waiting for. Elena misunderstood the situation, he said. She overstepped in negotiations. That's why we had to let her go. My fingers tightened. Overstepped? 6 weeks of salvaging his disaster, and I overstepped? Matthias' voice went colder than I had ever heard it. Elena built this agreement. You destroyed it. Goodbye. And he hung up. Just like that. I exhaled slowly. It felt like oxygen had returned to the room. But my phone started buzzing immediately. Daniel. And again. And again. I silenced it. He had chosen text message termination. He didn't deserve a call back. Nova Industrial sent a driver. Not a taxi. A black sedan with a suited driver holding a sign with my name on it. I hadn't felt valued in a long time. It was a strange sensation. The Nova headquarters was modern. Glass walls. Clean architecture. Quiet confidence. I caught my reflection in the lobby glass. Same blazer. Same shoes. Same woman who had been fired less than 12 hours ago. But I looked different. Straighter. Sharper. Because I knew something Daniel didn't. I wasn't done. I was just redirected. The executive who greeted us was Sophia Reinhardt. Mid-40s. Direct gaze. Firm handshake. Matthias speaks highly of you, she said, leading us into a conference room. I sat across from her and decided something. No corporate script. No rehearsed humility. Just truth. She leaned back. Why are you here instead of on a flight home? Because that was the question, wasn't it? I was terminated last night, I said evenly. Via text. While closing an $11 million contract. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. And yet you're here. Yes. Why? I held her gaze. Because I built something valuable. And I won't let someone else profit from work they didn't respect. The room was quiet. Sophia nodded slowly. Tell me about your network. So I did. Germany. Italy. Specialty manufacturers. Logistics pipelines. Regulatory navigation. Cultural negotiation. Not inflated. Not dramatized. Just facts. When I finished, she didn't speak immediately. Instead, she asked one question. If we brought you in, could you replicate what you built? Yes, I said without hesitation. Under pressure? Yes. Without burning bridges? Yes. A small smile appeared. Good. She folded her hands. What would you need to make this work? No one had asked me that before. Not Daniel. Not Harrison. What would I need? I have a daughter finishing high school, I said. Flexible travel. Competitive compensation. Authority to negotiate without being undermined. Sophia nodded. Done. I blinked. Done. Yes. Just like that. No ego. No power play. Just recognition. We value results, she said simply. And we don't fire people who produce them. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. But it hit deeper than anything Daniel had ever said to me. My phone buzzed again. Daniel. Then a text preview lit up my screen. This is a misunderstanding. Call me. I turned my phone face down. Too late. He had mistaken confidence for expendability. And now he was about to learn the difference. But I had no idea just how far this would ripple. Because what Daniel didn't know yet was that Harrison's largest infrastructure project depended entirely on Keller's steel. And Keller now belonged to Nova. By the time he realized the damage, it would already be irreversible. And I was done protecting him from his own arrogance. By the time I left Nova's headquarters, I wasn't unemployed anymore. I was recruited. There's a difference. A massive one. The offer wasn't vague either. It was specific. Higher base salary than I'd ever earned. Performance bonuses tied to global expansion. Travel structured around my schedule, not the other way around. And full authority over European procurement strategy. Full authority. Daniel had spent 3 years questioning every decision I made. Sophia handed me the reins in a single meeting. But that wasn't even the most satisfying part. The most satisfying part? I hadn't begged. I hadn't defended myself. I had simply told the truth about what I could do. And they believed me. The car ride back to Keller was quiet. Matthias looked over at me once. Well, they want me, I said. He smiled. Of course they do. Clara reached across from the front seat and squeezed my shoulder. I hope you say yes. I looked out the window. Fields rolled past in soft green waves. I think, I said slowly, I already did. Back at the facility my phone exploded. 23 missed calls. Most from Daniel. 3 from HR. 2 from someone in legal. That told me everything. He was panicking. Not because he missed me. Because he finally understood the clause. He must have opened the contract that morning looking for leverage. And found none. Without me it dissolved. Without Keller Steel his bridge project stalled. And without that project, Harrison's quarterly projections collapsed. I imagined him pacing in his glass office. Blaming everyone but himself. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the text. Figure out your way home. No explanation. No dignity. So I muted the entire thread. He could experience silence for once. That evening I finally called Lily. She answered on the second ring. Mom? Is everything okay? Her voice always grounded me. I sat on the small balcony outside the Keller guest room. The Bavarian sky fading pink and gold. I need to tell you something, I said. And I told her everything. The firing. The contract. The opportunity. There was a long pause when I finished. They fired you by text, she asked. Yes. That's disgusting. I laughed softly. That's one word for it. Another pause. Are you okay? That question hit harder than any executive negotiation ever had. Yes, I said honestly. I think I'm better than okay. You don't sound scared, she said. I admitted. For about an hour. And then I realized I wasn't the one who made the mistake. She was quiet for a moment. Are you going to take the new job? Yes. Good, she said immediately. No hesitation. Why good? Because you always tell me not to let people undervalue my work, she said. You can't let them undervalue yours. I swallowed hard. Kids listen more than we think. I won't, I promised. Also, she added, voice brightening, does this mean we can still afford MIT? I smiled. It means you can apply anywhere you want. She laughed. Okay, now I'm definitely on board. We talked for another 20 minutes. About school. About robotics. About nothing and everything. And when we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Light. The next morning Sophia called. We've drafted your formal offer, she said. And we've initiated partnership paperwork with Keller. That was fast. We move quickly, she added. Especially when competitors make poor decisions. I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. News travels fast in our industry. By midday rumors had started circulating. Harrison's German steel contract had collapsed. Project delays imminent. Investors asking questions. Daniel called again. this time from a private number. I let it ring. Then a voicemail notification appeared. I hesitated, then played it. Elena. His voice was strained now, none of that polished arrogance left. We need to talk. This is spiraling. If this is about compensation, we can fix that. Just call me. Compensation. He still didn't understand. This wasn't about money. It was about respect. And respect isn't something you offer only after you lose leverage. I deleted the voicemail. Because here's the thing Daniel never understood. You don't get to discard someone and then demand their loyalty when it's convenient. By the end of the week, Nova had officially signed with Keller. A public announcement. Press release. Strategic European partnership. I watched the industry news update from my phone. Harrison's stock dipped that afternoon. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. But I also didn't feel guilty. Because I hadn't sabotaged anything. Daniel had. All I did was refuse to fix it for him. That's an important distinction. One he would only understand far too late. 2 days later I boarded a flight home. Not on a cancelled company ticket. On one Nova purchased without hesitation. Business class. When I sat down I stared out the window and thought about that hotel lobby. About the moment I thought everything was over. I had felt small. Disposable. Alone. But I wasn't. I had built something real. And real relationships don't vanish because a manager sends a text. As the plane lifted off, my phone buzzed one last time before takeoff. An email from Harrison's HR department. Subject line, reinstatement discussion. I opened it. They were offering a higher salary. Immediate promotion. Apologies for miscommunication. Miscommunication. That's what they were calling it. I laughed out loud. The flight attendant glanced at me. Everything okay? Yes, I said, still smiling. Everything is finally okay. I closed the email. Didn't respond. Because I wasn't climbing back into a place that treated me like trash just because they realized my value too late. That chapter was closed. And the next one? It was going to be bigger than Daniel could ever imagine. What he didn't know yet was that losing Keller Steel was only the beginning. The dominoes had just started falling. And this time, I wasn't the one scrambling to stay upright. Coming home felt different. The last time I'd walked through our front door, I was exhausted, anxious, carrying the weight of an $11 million negotiation on my shoulders. This time, I was carrying something else. Power. Lily opened the door before I even rang the bell. She threw her arms around me like she used to when she was 10. You look different, she said, pulling back to study my face. Different good or different stressed? Different confident. That word stayed with me. Confident. Not defensive. Not overworked. Not bracing for criticism. Confident. We sat at the kitchen table that night with takeout containers scattered between us. I told her everything. The Nova offer, the partnership with Keller, the flexible schedule. They tried to rehire you, she asked, eyes wide. Yes. And? I ignored it. He grinned. That's savage. I laughed. I prefer the word self-respecting. But here's what I didn't tell her yet. Harrison Global wasn't just embarrassed. They were unraveling. And it was happening faster than anyone expected. 3 weeks later, I was officially back in Munich. This time as Director of European Procurement for Nova Industrial. Different title. Different authority. Very different energy. My apartment overlooked a quiet street near the city center. Nova covered everything, housing, transportation, travel back home every 2 weeks. Sophia met me on my first official day. Ready to build something sustainable? She asked. Yes, I said. And I meant it. Because this wasn't about proving Daniel wrong anymore. It was about building something right. Within 2 months, we had secured not just Keller Steel, but 2 additional specialty suppliers Harrison had once relied on. Word spreads quickly when a company mishandles a key executive. Suppliers talk. And many of them had stories about Daniel. Dismissive emails. Aggressive pricing tactics. Last-minute demands. They tolerated it because Harrison was big. But loyalty? That belonged to people. And I had treated them like partners. Not line items. But that wasn't even the worst news for Harrison. The Morrison Bridge project, their flagship contract, depended entirely on the precision-grade steel Keller produced. Without it, deadlines slipped. Contractors stalled. Penalties triggered. Industry forums began speculating. Then financial analysts picked up the pattern. Delayed procurement. Missed milestones. Projected losses. Harrison's stock dropped another 8% in a single week. And then Daniel called again. Not me, Matthias. He tried to renegotiate. Offered more money. Longer commitments. Even personal apologies. Matthias told me about the call over coffee one afternoon. What did you say? I asked. He stirred his espresso calmly. I told him something simple. He looked up at me. I said, you had the best procurement strategist in Europe working for you. You chose to discard her. That is not our problem. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So I did neither. I just sat there absorbing the weight of that validation. For 15 years I thought I was replaceable. Turns out, I wasn't. The real collapse came in month 5. Harrison announced organizational restructuring. That's corporate language for panic. Daniel fired 2 more managers. Blamed supply chain disruptions. Blamed inflation. Blamed global instability. But internally, everyone knew. They had lost Keller. And they had lost me. Without stable steel procurement, 3 major projects fell behind schedule. 1 client sued for breach of timeline. Investors demanded accountability. Daniel was removed quietly 6 weeks later. No dramatic headlines. Just a statement about leadership transition. But I heard the real story from an old colleague. He's scrambling, she told me over a secure call. Nobody wants to touch him. Suppliers won't take his meetings. Because here's the thing about reputation. It travels faster than resumes. And Daniel had built his on arrogance. Meanwhile, Nova was expanding. Our fall infrastructure launch exceeded projections by 14%. New contracts rolled in. European partnerships solidified. And Sophia called me into her office one afternoon. Do you know what you've done? She asked. I negotiated well? I offered. She shook her head slightly. You built trust capital. That's rarer than financial capital. She slid a document across the desk. Senior Vice President of Global Procurement. 60% salary increase. Equity options. Remote flexibility. My throat tightened. A year ago I was sitting in a hotel lobby wondering how I'd get home. Now I was being handed executive authority. What changed? Sophia asked gently. I thought about it. I stopped accepting less than I was worth. She smiled. Exactly. The day Nova opened its first U.S. headquarters in Chicago, I brought Lily with me. She wore a navy blazer and looked every inch like the future engineer she planned to become. Did you really help build all this? She whispered as we walked through the event hall. I helped connect the right people, I said. The steel workers. The manufacturers. The engineers. And they respect you? Yes. She nodded slowly. Good. Jennifer. Sorry, Sophia. Introduced me to investors as the architect behind our global supplier stability. Architect. That word nearly broke me. Because for so long I had felt invisible. That night on the flight home, Lily fell asleep against my shoulder. And I stared out at the dark sky thinking about that text message again. We're cutting you loose. Daniel thought he was ending my career. Instead he ended his own. But here's the truth. I didn't destroy Harrison. I didn't sabotage Daniel. I simply refused to rescue him from the consequences of his disrespect. Sometimes, that's the most powerful move you can make. The best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's growth. It's walking away when someone shows you exactly how little they value you. It's building something better. Somewhere that sees you clearly. A year ago I had $83 in my purse and no flight home. Today, my daughter's college fund is secure. My career is thriving. And I will never again confuse loyalty with self-erasure. Daniel sent one text message. He thought it made me small. But what it really did was set me free.